You have 48 hours to leave or we'll remove you ourselves." The woman's voice cut through my morning like a chainsaw through bone. You ever have one of those moments where time just kind of freezes? I stood there, coffee mug halfway to my mouth, staring at a bunch of uniformed strangers flooding onto my land. Their badges read something I'd never seen before: Meadowbrook Patrol. And let me tell you, after 40 years working this ranch, 40 years of mud and sweat and heartbreak and pride, nothing quite prepares you for the sight of a fresh-baked Karen marching up your driveway like she owns the sunrise. I wasn't afraid, not exactly. Nah, it was something deeper, like someone just spit on your family photo. You know what I mean? My coffee mug shook in my grip, but not from fear. They wanted me gone. That much was clear. Why I hadn't a clue yet. If you're watching from anywhere near Texas, drop a comment. You won't believe what happened next. That morning started wrong before the sun even thought about rising. 5:30 a.m. Pitch dark, and my chickens were losing their minds out in the coop. Not the normal wake-up calls either. No, this was full-blown panic. Pure and simple. I rolled out of bed, joints creaking and popping after 65 years of hard living. Grabbed my old flashlight from the nightstand, the one I keep just for snake hunting or apparently pre-dawn chicken emergencies. I stepped onto the porch, that first breath of chilled air hitting me, and swept the beam out toward the eastern fence line. And what I saw made my blood run cold. The heavy-gauge steel fence, the one that had stood solid for 20 years, was lying twisted and cut like someone had just taken a saw to my whole sense of safety. Professional work, too. Not just some rowdy teenagers with wire cutters. 10 of my best laying hens gone. Nothing left but scattered feathers and silence. I crouched down to check the ground. Deep tire tracks pressed into the mud-heavy trucks, not pickups. And then I spotted it caught on a snapped length of wire, a scrap of blue fabric. I angled my flashlight, and there it was, Meadowbrook Patrol embroidered bold as you please. Meadowbrook, the new development that popped up 2 years ago like a bad rash on the good farmland east of my property. I'd heard rumors, the kind of HOA horror stories that make the rounds at the feed store, but this was something else entirely. By 7, I'd patched the fence as best I could, half praying the rest of my flock would settle down. The survivors huddled together in the farthest corner of the run, still spooked out of their minds. I was brewing my second pot of coffee when I heard engines coming up my drive. Not just one, either multiple vehicles moving slow and deliberate. Through my kitchen window, I watched a black Mercedes pull up, followed by 2 matching SUVs. Out steps, this woman looked like she'd just walked off the cover of Fortune magazine. Power suit, designer heels, blonde hair shellacked into place, didn't even sink an inch into my gravel driveway. 6 people flanked her, all wearing those blue uniforms I was already starting to hate. I stayed inside, let them come to me. This was still my land. "Mr. Granger," she called, voice sharp and demanding, carrying across the yard like she'd spent her life commanding rooms full of people who never dared talk back. "We need to discuss last night's incident." I took my time walking out, coffee in hand. No point looking rattled even if my mind was running circles. "And you are." Karen White, president of Meadowbrook Homeowners Association. She said it like I was supposed to be impressed. "Your chickens were found wandering through our community at 4 this morning. Several residents were disturbed. Children were frightened." I kept my voice level. "Funny thing about chickens, they don't usually wander through cut fences on their own." Her smile was colder than a January night. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean. However, the safety violation is clear." She held out an envelope like it was the word of God himself. "This details the fines and remediation costs," she announced. I opened it, eyes hit the number first, $5,000. The letterhead had an eagle logo that looked a little too much like a vulture for my taste. "Emergency livestock containment fee," it said. "Community safety violation assessment." "My ranch isn't part of your HOA, I told her, handing it right back. "Never has been." She didn't take the papers. "Your operations affect our community, Mr. Granger. We're offering you an opportunity to join voluntarily, to become a good neighbor. Otherwise," she let it hang there like a noose. The younger man next to her, Brad, stitched on his uniform, stepped forward. Big guy built like a linebacker who'd traded weights for donuts trying to look tough. "The old man doesn't get it, Mom. Maybe we should explain better, Mom." So this was a family operation. Made it worse somehow. Corruption handed down like a bad inheritance. My property's been in my family for 80 years, I said steady. It was here before your development, before your HOA, before any of this. I got no interest in joining anything. Karen's smile didn't budge, but her eyes went hard as granite. Times change, Mr. Granger. This area is developing. Property values are rising. Your farm is becoming incompatible with the community's vision. My farm feeds people, I said. What's your community produce besides paperwork? Brad's face went red as a beet. Listen here, old man. Brad. Karen's voice cracked like a whip. Her son stepped back, but his hand stayed clenched. She turned to me again, pulling out a business card with gold-embossed letters. You have 30 days to reconsider. After that, well-enforcement measures become necessary. She placed the card on my porch railing with deliberate care. White Development is always interested in purchasing properties at fair market value, it said. After they left, I took a good look at that business card. Karen White, HOA President, and CEO White Development. Same company, same person. This wasn't about community standards, this was about land. And I knew then this wasn't just a fight for my ranch. This was a fight for everything my family had built. I called Marcus Coleman before the dust had even settled. He'd been my best friend since 10th grade. He's the sheriff now. Marcus, they're starting. Who's starting what? His voice had that weight only too many early mornings can put on a man. That HOA you warned me about. Karen White. She just tried to fine me $5,000 for chickens that were stolen. Fence cut clean through. Professional job. And before you ask, I found a scrap from their patrol uniforms caught in the wire. He sighed long and heavy. Can you prove it in court? You know I can't, not yet. Then be careful, Tom. I've been looking into them for months. They're smart. They know exactly how far to push without crossing into criminal territory. Document everything. Get some cameras up. What are they after, Marcus? A long pause. Best I can figure, land. 12 families have sold in the past 2 years, all below market value, all after getting buried in fines and violations. And White Development buys them up. Every single one. Legal but dirty as hell. After we hung up, I walked my property line son coming up dew on the grass, birds singing like nothing had changed. Near the back 40, I found its surveyor's flags bright orange just outside my property line. They were measuring, planning. That evening, I drove to the county clerk's office. Old paper smells sunlight pouring through the windows. Spent 2 hours digging through property records confirming what I already knew. My land free and clear. No HOA jurisdiction, no easements except the original road from 1922. Eugene, the clerk, leaned over the counter. Tom, you be careful. That white woman, she's got a system. Fines, violations, complaints. Makes life miserable till selling feels like the only way out. She mentioned MDC Holdings, I said. His eyes widened. How'd you know about that? Lucky guess. That's White Development, isn't it? He nodded. Every property she's forced out MDC buys. Word is she's assembling something big. 200 acres for some resort development. My 40 acres sat right in the middle. The last piece of the puzzle. Driving home, I noticed a white SUV in my rearview mirror hanging back, but definitely following. Light bar on top, private security, not cops. As I turned onto my ranch road, I caught the door decal Meadowbrook Patrol Forest Protection Unit. Forest protection. Against what chickens? That night, I stood on my porch looking out over the land my grandfather had cleared by hand. Somewhere beyond that fence line, Karen White was playing a long game. The cut fence, the stolen chickens, just the opening move. I went inside and started a list: security cameras, new locks, fence repairs, and most important, a paper trail for everything. If they wanted to play legal games, I'd make sure every move was documented. But the question that kept me awake was simple. How far would they go? Looking at that gold-embossed card, thinking of Brad's clenched fists and the term Force Protection Unit, I had a bad feeling I was about to find out. One thing was certain, they'd picked the wrong ranch to mess with. 3 days passed in uneasy quiet. I spent them installing security cameras, the kind that upload to the cloud whether you want them to or not. Every angle covered, every entrance monitored. If they came back, I'd have proof. And if you're watching this later, well, maybe you're looking at the footage now. But that calm, shattered Thursday morning before the dew burned off, Beth Anderson, my neighbor from 2 farms over, called before I'd even finished brewing coffee. Tom, you need to see this. They're having some kind of ceremony at the community center. So I drove to the Meadowbrook entrance, parked across the street, watched from my truck, never stepped a foot on their turf. What I saw had my jaw clenched for hours. Karen White stood on a makeshift stage addressing a crowd of maybe 200, flanked by 30 men and women in blue uniforms lined up like a private army. Later, Marcus ran some plates, none matched the makes or years, stolen, swapped, who knows. Today marks a new chapter in community safety. Karen's voice boomed through loudspeakers. The Meadowbrook Patrol is officially commissioned to protect our families, our homes, our values. Brad White stepped forward now with captain's insignia, chest puffed out, scanning the crowd like he was a general. Our patrol will operate 24/7, he announced. We have full authority to investigate any threats to community safety and security. I wondered what legal dictionary they'd fished that phrase from. Everything was made to look almost like real law enforcement, but just off enough to stay out of jail. White SUVs with flashing lights, badges that sparkled in the morning sun, new uniforms and those same vulture eagle logos. Walking right on the edge of impersonation. I noticed something else. The Johnsons weren't there, nor the Petermans, nor the Garcias. All families who'd sold to MDC Holdings according to county records. All people who'd once owned the land beneath Karen's feet. After the ceremony, I drove to Beth's. She met me at her gate, worry lines deepening her face. Tom, they came by yesterday. Said my horse trailer parked by the road was a visual blight. Gave me 72 hours to move it. That trailer's been there 5 years. And you're not part of their HOA either, I said. Doesn't seem to matter. They say their patrol has jurisdiction over anything that affects community safety or property values. She handed me a paper. Fines escalating, first $100, second $500, third $5,000. Same logo, same official-looking letterhead. The Johnsons fought them for 6 months. Legal fees wiped them out. Sold for 60 cents on the dollar. MDC Holdings, only buyer. I drove home thinking about patterns. Create a problem, offer the solution. Classic shakedown just dressed up in bureaucracy and badges. That evening it really started. 3 patrol SUVs parked on the public road outside my ranch, engines running lights on, just sitting there watching. Not trespassing technically, just sitting. I went about my chores, fed the chickens, checked the patched fence, watered the garden. But they didn't leave. When darkness fell, spotlights turned on, sweeping across my property in slow, deliberate arcs. At 10, the air horn started, a short burst every hour on the hour. I called the sheriff's department. Unless they're on your property, not much we can do, the deputy said. Public road, no law against parking there. What about the noise? File a complaint. Process takes about 6 weeks. By sunrise, I'd had maybe 2 hours of sleep. The patrol cars were gone, but the message was loud and clear. This was just the beginning. That afternoon, I walked the fence line with a notebook, calling out times for the camera logs. At dusk, an SUV idled at the shoulder lights, pulsing like a heartbeat. By dark, there were 3 and a drone buzzing over the barn, rattling the tin roof. Spotlights combed the pasture, lingered on my windows, slid across the chicken run until the birds went silent, huddled together. Every hour an air horn split the night, then a siren chirp, then the slow crunch of tires on gravel. None of it crossed the line. All of it meant to shove me over it. Marcus stopped by that afternoon out of uniform, just 2 old friends with coffee, but tension in his shoulders you could see from the next county. Tom, I've been digging deeper. Karen White isn't just some HOA president with ambitions. What'd you find? She ran this same playbook in Arizona. 3 developments, same pattern. Always partners with out-of-state developers. Big money resort chains. 200 acres, I said. That's what Eugene at the courthouse said. Marcus nodded. Premier Resorts International. Preliminary proposal filed with the State Luxury Resort Golf Course, the works. Your 40 acres sit right where they want to put the main hotel. You're the last holdout. Everyone else either sold or got pushed out. He set down his coffee, careful. There's more. Brad White has a record assault intimidation impersonating an officer, all in Arizona. Charges dropped every time. Money talks. Money screams, I said. And Tom, they've hired a law firm, Finnegan and Associates. They specialize in property acquisition through alternative means, meaning they know every legal trick to make your life hell until you sell. That night, the patrol returned. Set up what looked like a training exercise on the road cones, flashing lights directing non-existent traffic blocking access to my ranch. I had a feed delivery scheduled for the morning, no way the truck could get through. I took pictures, video, documented everything. Then I did something that probably wasn't smart. I walked out to the road. Brad White saw me coming, straightened up, tried to look intimidating. "Evening, Mr. Granger. Just conducting community safety drills. On a public road blocking access to private property. Safety comes first," he said, that smirk making my fists itch. "These drills are scheduled for the next week, maybe longer. Of course, HOA members get advance notice to plan accordingly." "Move the cones," I said, quiet but steady. His smirk widened. "Or what, old man, you'll call the real cops. They already know we're here. All perfectly legal." He was right, and we both knew it. They'd found the gray area and pitched a tent there. I turned and walked back to the house, feeling Brad's eyes burning holes in my back. Inside, I called my feed supplier, arranged for a 5 a.m. delivery before the patrol set up. Then I sat at my kitchen table, legal pad in front of me, and started writing times, dates, names, actions, building a case one detail at a time. The phone rang at midnight, no caller ID. Mr. Granger, nervous woman's voice. "This is Janet Morrison. I heard about what's happening to you." Morrison, the name Eugene had mentioned. The family that fought back in 2004. "I'm listening." "They did the same thing to us. The patrol, the fines, the harassment. We tried to fight, spent everything on lawyers. But it wasn't the legal fees that broke us." What was a long pause? "They're smart, Mr. Granger. They don't do anything clearly illegal. They just make life impossible. Block your deliveries, scare away your customers, report you to every agency they can think of. Death by 1,000 paper cuts." "Why are you calling me?" "Because you need to know what you're up against. And because someone needs to stop them. We couldn't. Maybe you can." "Janet, what happened to your family?" Her voice dropped. "Stress killed my husband. Heart attack at 53. I sold the farm a month later, took whatever they offered, just wanted it over." After she hung up, I sat in the dark kitchen thinking. They'd refined the system over years, maybe decades. Legal harassment, bureaucratic warfare, psychological pressure. How many families had they destroyed? How many farms had been lost to their development machine? Outside, another air horn blast split the night. I looked at the clock, 3:00 a.m., right on schedule. I picked up my pen and kept writing. Documentation was a weapon too, maybe the only one that could beat them at their own game. But I'd need help. More than Marcus could provide, stuck as he was inside the lines of his badge. The thought came uninvited. What if their next visit wasn't just harassment? What if Karen White decided that paperwork and patrol cars weren't moving things fast enough? I looked out my window at the flashing lights, at men in uniforms playing at being soldiers. Force Protection Unit. The name said it all. They weren't here to protect. They were here to force sales force, compliance force, surrender. But force works both ways. For every action, there's a reaction. They'd made their move, showed their hand. Now it was my turn. Day 7 of what I'd started calling the siege. The Meadowbrook Patrol kept up their training exercises every single night, blocking my road from dusk till dawn. The feed truck managed to squeeze through at 5 in the morning, but my customers weren't so lucky. Jim Bradley bought eggs from me for 15 years, called to cancel his order. "Sorry, Tom." Sat there for 2 hours yesterday while they inspected vehicles for community safety. Can't afford to waste that kind of time. By noon, I'd lost 3 more customers. My vegetable stand, usually busy with locals and passers-by, sat empty. Word had spread getting to Granger Ranch meant dealing with the patrol. I was tallying up losses when I heard engines again. Multiple. Through my window, I counted 6 patrol SUVs plus Karen White's Mercedes. Not a social call. I stepped onto the porch as they parked just inside my gate, the gate I'd left open foolishly for customers who weren't coming. Karen emerged like a queen surveying conquered territory. Brad and 10 uniformed patrol members in a semicircle behind her. "Mr. Granger," she said, voice sticky sweet. I thought it was time we had another conversation. "Get off my property, now." "No need for hostility. I'm here with a generous offer." She pulled out a folder thick with documents. Market value for your 40 acres. Cash deal. Closed in 30 days. You could retire comfortably, maybe somewhere quieter. This place is plenty quiet when your patrol isn't running air horns all night. Brad stepped forward, face already flushed. Show some respect when my mother's talking to you. Respect is earned, I said, eyes never leaving Karen. Like trust. And right now, you've got neither. Karen's smile got tight. I'm trying to be reasonable, Mr. Granger. This development is happening. You can be part of the prosperity or... She gestured at the patrol. Community standards are becoming stricter. Stricter how? She handed me another paper. We've had numerous complaints about your operation. Noise from roosters, smell from livestock, unsafe structures. Environmental hazards. Each word fell like a stone. The patrol has documented extensive violations. Violations of what? I'm not part of your HOA. Of county health and safety codes, building regulations, environmental protections. She handed me the paper, 48 violations in total. The fines, $87,000. Of course, Karen continued, if you were to sell, new ownership would absolve these violations. Clean slate. And if I don't, Brad's grin was all predator. Then we start enforcement procedures, safety inspections, code compliance checks, daily visits to ensure community standards are met. You mean harassment? I mean protecting our community, Brad shot back. Old man like you, accidents happen. Fences fail. Animals escape. Buildings collapse. Brad Karen snapped, but her eyes glittered approval. What my son means is farming can be dangerous without proper oversight. We're simply concerned for your welfare. I looked at the patrol, most of them young, trying to look tough. But I caught something in a few faces, discomfort, maybe even shame. Not everyone was buying what Karen was selling. You have 48 hours to accept our offer, Karen said. After that, enforcement begins in earnest. And Mr. Granger, the offer drops 10% every week you delay. They turned to leave, but Brad hung back. You know what your problem is, old man? You think this is still 1950. Times change. People like you get left behind or get run over. Your choice. After they left, I called Marcus. Told him everything, the threats, the fines, the fabricated violations. He listened in silence. Tom, I need to be careful what I say on the phone, but hypothetically, if someone were documenting all this, having witnesses would strengthen any future legal action. Witnesses like who? Oh, maybe neighbors, delivery drivers, anyone who's seen what's happening. And hypothetically, if enforcement procedures escalate to something clearly illegal, law enforcement would need to be immediately notified. I heard what he wasn't saying. Keep documenting, get witnesses, and be ready to call when they finally cross the line from gray area to black and white. That night they escalated. Air horns were replaced by construction equipment, a massive diesel generator, floodlights that turned night into day. They set up right at my property line, careful not to cross, but the noise was deafening. I didn't sleep. Instead, I made phone calls. Beth Anderson agreed to write a statement. Jim Bradley said he'd testify. Even Janet Morrison, voice stronger, now promised to document her family's experience. Dawn was gray and bitter. I was feeding the chickens when I heard the rumble. A flatbed truck with an excavator followed by a bulldozer parked just inside my property line, definitely trespassing now. Brad jumped down from a patrol vehicle, clipboard in hand. Morning, Granger. Just here to mark safety violations. That old barn's structurally unsound. Needs to come down. Gotta clear a perimeter 20 feet all around. That'll take out your chicken coop, garden shed, maybe that old oak. You're trespassing. Get out. Just protecting the community, Brad said. Mom's orders. Can't have unsafe structures next to Meadowbrook. What if it collapsed? What if someone got hurt? The excavator operator started his engine bucket swinging toward my barn. Stop, I shouted. Brad cupped his ear. Can't hear you over the safety equipment. The bucket swung closer. That barn held my father's workbench, my grandfather's iron still hanging on the wall. The kind of quiet history you only notice when a machine threatens to turn it into splinters. I pulled out my phone, started recording. This is Thomas Granger. It's 7:43 a.m. on Thursday. Meadowbrook Patrol has brought heavy equipment onto my property without permission. They're threatening to demolish my barn. Brad's grin faltered. The excavator operator hesitated, glancing between Brad and me. I am formally refusing permission for any work on my property. I continued loud and clear. Any damage will be reported to law enforcement as criminal destruction of property. Clock's ticking, Brad shouted over the engine. Take Mom's offer, or we start clearing every so-called violation, every unsafe structure, every damn chicken coop we mark. He signaled, and the operator raised the bucket backed away. They loaded up Brad, making sure to rev engines and spin tires, leaving deep ruts in my driveway. As they left, I saw one of the patrol members. The young guy who looked uncomfortable earlier glanced back and gave me the smallest nod. Not approval, maybe a warning, maybe a promise. That day I called a property rights lawyer in Austin. Sent him everything, videos, papers, every minute I had. He listened, asked questions, then said, Mr. Granger, they're following a playbook. I've seen it before. How far are they willing to go? In Arizona, a rancher had a mysterious fire. In New Mexico, water rights suddenly got contested. In Nevada, environmental inspectors found endangered species that no one had ever seen before. All coincidences, of course. That night I stood in my barn, running my hand over my father's workbench. The wood was smooth from decades of use. Oiled, stained, loved. Karen White saw an obstacle to bulldoze. I saw 3 generations of honest work. The bulldozer tracks looked like scars, but every threat, every line they crossed, it was all documented now. My phone was a weapon, my camera was a shield. They thought they were boxing me in. Maybe they were building their own cage. I looked at the federal number Marcus had slipped me, not his sheriff card, just in case. 48 hours. Time enough to prepare. Time enough to turn their own tactics against them. Because if Karen White wanted to play by the law, then by God, we'd play by all of it. She had money and muscle. I had patience, the kind that comes from decades of working land that tries to kill you every few years. Tomorrow would bring new threats, but tonight I had work to do, calls to make, plans to set, a legal trap to construct. They wanted my land. They'd have to go through the real law to get it. And maybe, just maybe, that would be their biggest mistake. The last morning came both too fast and too slow all at once. You know that feeling. I'd been up since 5, not from the patrol's racket. They'd gone suspiciously quiet for 2 nights, but from the weight of what was coming. The deadline, the showdown. The road outside felt like it was holding its breath. I put on my best vest, the one Martha got me for our 40th before cancer took her. Felt right somehow putting on armor that meant something. Set our wedding photo on the kitchen table, her smile giving me all the grit I needed. House was cleaner than it'd been in years. Every paper filed, every surface dusted, like I was daring them to find a single thing wrong beyond what they'd already invented. Even polished my granddad's horseshoes in the barn, the ones the bulldozer threatened. At 6 a.m., my phone buzzed. Marcus, this time texting, not calling. They're mobilizing. Multiple vehicles at Meadowbrook. Be ready. Coffee strong, black, old school. Then I called Beth Anderson. It's happening today, I said. I know, she said, voice steelier than usual. Tom, there's 20 of us gathering at my place. We're not letting you face this alone. Stay off my property, I warned. This could get ugly. We'll stay on the public road just like their damn patrol likes to do. By 7, you could hear the rumble, heavy equipment rolling down the county road. Stepped onto my porch, coffee in hand, watched the convoy approach. 3 excavators on flatbeds, 2 bulldozers, a crane, and Karen White's Mercedes leading the whole parade, 6 patrol SUVs in formation. But behind them there was a second convoy, Beth's red pickup, Jim Bradley's battered van, Eugene from the clerk's office and his old Ford folks who'd been my neighbors and customers and friends for decades. My community showing up to bear witness. The HOA crew parked at my gate. 50 people climbed out, patrol uniforms, hard hats, a whole show of force. Karen came last, dressed for a board meeting, not a siege. Brad beside her, practically vibrating. My neighbors rolled up behind, lining their vehicles along the public right-of-way. Phones out, hats low, silent but watching. Beth climbed on her tailgate, steady as a news crew filming everything. Eugene stood like a sentry folder in hand. Across the fence, my cattle bunched up, uneasy as a storm. Air had that flat copper taste it gets before a tornado, except these clouds wore uniforms. Karen's voice through a megaphone, Mr. Granger, your time is up. Will you accept our generous offer, or must we proceed with enforcement? I walked to my gate, stopping 10 feet from their little army. The sun behind me made them squint, and for once I took the advantage. You're on land outside any HOA jurisdiction, I called loud and clear. No contract, no easement, no police power. Cross this fence, you're looking at criminal trespass and destruction of property. Karen pulled out a stack of papers. Emergency Health and Safety Ordinance signed yesterday. Your land is now an imminent hazard. Signed by whom? The Meadowbrook Community Safety Board. An entity with no statutory standing, stacked with your own staff, I shot back. No ordinance, no jurisdiction. Her smile was all teeth. We'll test that. Brad begins safety operations. Brad waved the equipment operators forward. Tear it all down. Start with the barn. The lead excavator lurched toward my gate. The operator, Hispanic guy in his 40s, looked nervous but determined. Probably had kids. I understood that pressure. Stop right there, I yelled. I've got something to say. The operator hesitated, looking between me and Brad. Every one of you workers, I raised my voice. You're about to commit felony destruction of property. That's prison time. Did your employer mention their insurance won't cover criminal acts? Engines idled. Operators exchanged glances. One shut off his machine. Don't listen to him, Brad screamed. Do your jobs. I held up my phone. I've documented every threat, every trespass, every violation. My attorney has copies. The sheriff has copies. You proceed. You're not just following orders. You're committing crimes. More engines shut off. Karen's mask slipped, fury flashing in her eyes. She yanked the megaphone from Brad. Mr. Granger, you're delaying the inevitable. We have the law on our side. No, ma'am, I said. You have lawyers. There's a difference. Behind them, I saw my neighbors spreading out, forming a long line along the road, phones recording witnesses multiplying. I ain't going to prison for a demolition job, one bulldozer driver said, climbing down. You want it torn down? Get a real court order. You're fired, Brad screamed. Fine by me, the man replied, walking away. Within minutes, half the workers abandoned their posts. Karen spat orders at her patrol, operate the equipment yourselves, but nobody moved. Then my phone rang, speaker on. Thomas Granger here. Tom, it's Marcus. I'm 5 minutes out with 3 units. If anyone operates that equipment without proper licenses, that's criminal endangerment. Karen heard. Everyone heard. Patrol members stepped away from the machines. This isn't over, Karen hissed, wild now. You think you've won? I've broken stronger men than you. Smarter, maybe. Richer, probably, I said. But breaking only works if someone's got something to lose that matters more than the fight. Maybe I'm just too old or too damn stubborn. Everyone has a price. Maybe. But you can't afford mine. I took a slow sip of coffee. You think this is about money. It's about home. About right and wrong. About a line in the dirt. That's when Brad snapped. You sanctimonious old bastard. You think you're better than us? You're nothing, a nobody on worthless land. Brad, Karen's warning was too late. This land is worth $40 million to the resort, Brad screamed. $40 million! And you're sitting on it like some idiot. Brad, shut up. He jerked away, reached into the patrol SUV, pulled something black and metallic taser, not a gun, but it made everyone freeze. $40 million, he repeated, coming at me. And all we need is you gone, just you gone. Brad White, stop right there. Marcus's voice cut through the chaos. I hadn't even heard the sheriff's cruisers arrive. Marcus stood, hand on his weapon, 2 deputies beside him. Drop it now. He's trespassing, Brad shrieked, waving the taser. This is Thomas Granger's property. You're holding a weapon on him. That's assault with a deadly weapon. Drop it or I drop you. For a heartbeat, everything hung on a knife edge. Brad purple with rage, hands shaking. Karen frozen. Patrol backing away. My neighbors silent. Then Brad just collapsed. Shoulders slumped, taser fell to the dirt. He made us do this. If he'd just sold... Hands behind your back, Marcus said. You're under arrest. Karen surged forward. You can't. He's protecting our community. Deputy Williams blocked her. Your son just committed aggravated assault in front of 40 witnesses. As they cuffed Brad, Karen turned to me, her mask shattered, something raw and ugly left. You destroyed everything, years of planning, millions in development. For what, chickens and dirt? For home, I said. She laughed bitter, hopeless. Home. You think this is over? I have lawyers' money connections. You also have a son heading to lockup and 40 million reasons for the FBI to look into your land deals. That stopped her. For a moment, she just stared. Behind her, patrol members quietly melted away. Marcus approached. Mrs. White, I'll need you to come to the station. We have questions about your HOA's activities. I'm calling my lawyer. You do that. In the meantime, I'll need all these vehicles off Mr. Granger's property. The legitimate ones anyway. The stolen ones were impounding. Stolen, Karen's voice cracked. 3 of those patrol vehicles were reported stolen in Arizona. Interesting coincidence. They led Brad away, mumbling about 40 million like it was a magic spell. Karen followed Deputy at her side. The army that came to destroy my home melted into nothing. Soon it was just me, Marcus, and my neighbors under the bright Texas sun. Beth Anderson started clapping. Then Jim Bradley. Then everybody. Not for me, but for the idea that sometimes, just sometimes, the bullies don't win. Marcus clapped me on the shoulder. This isn't over. She'll lawyer up. There'll be investigations. You'll need to testify. I know. I finished my coffee cold but still sweet. But they showed their hand admitted the 40 million. That's going to interest a lot of people. Federal people, Marcus agreed. Tom, I'd show up right then. I smiled. I knew you'd do your job when the law was broken. That's all I counted on. He nodded. Your dad would be proud. After everyone left, I walked my property, the ruts from the bulldozer, the battered barn, the quiet chickens. The land would heal. The sun was climbing, promising another day. I thought about Karen White probably facing an interrogation. About Brad learning some things can't be taken by force. About all the families driven out maybe finally seeing justice. But mostly I thought about tomorrow. There'd be eggs, to gather vegetables, to tend fences, to check the rhythm of life no HOA could regulate. Then my phone rang a number I didn't know. Mr. Granger, this is Agent Sarah Clark with the FBI. We understand you have information about interstate fraud involving Meadowbrook HOA. Would tomorrow morning work for you to come in? After I feed the chickens, I said. Say 9. She laughed warm and real. 9 works. And Mr. Granger, thank you for standing up to them. You'd be surprised how rare that is. Just protecting what's mine, I said. But it was more than that. We both knew it. Sometimes a line has to be drawn. Sometimes someone has to say no more. And sometimes an old farmer with nothing left to lose but everything to protect is exactly what's needed. The sun was warm on my face as I headed inside. There was work to do. But first I'd sit on my porch, look out at my land, and savor this moment. Because today, for once, the good guys won. By 800 the next morning, I heard careful footsteps on my porch instead of diesel horns. Different kind of tension in the air. The night before, after hours at the station, Karen White walked out without charges, free, on the kind of thin promise only money can buy. I'd spent that night laying out files, checking every camera and mic. If she wanted to force my hand, she could try it face to face with every second recorded. I opened the door. No wall of uniforms this time. Just Karen, 2 patrol supervisors, and a couple of men in suits carrying briefcases trying to look like authority. Brad's arrest had stripped away their theater. All they had left was paper. My phone lit up with Karen's number before I reached the door. Her voice had lost the act, kept only the threat. Last chance, Granger, sign the transfer and the patrol stands down. I set her on speaker right beside the camera lens. You come back here with machines and you'll be forcing every agency already watching you to act. Silence on her end, the sound of a plan collapsing. I stepped out onto the porch, coffee mug in hand. Morning, Mrs. White. Beautiful day, isn't it? Got fresh coffee if you want to talk this out civil-like. She actually laughed harsh and bitter. You had my son arrested. No, ma'am. He did that all by himself, pulling a weapon in front of a crowd. I took a slow sip, let the moment stretch. But please come in. You and your patrol, let's talk about what you really want. She hesitated, thrown off script. Behind her movement caught my eye. Marcus's cruiser parked behind my barn. 3 state police vehicles positioned where you wouldn't spot them at first glance. We'd planned this, you see, in those sleepless early hours. Not just to protect me, but to expose her. Talking is over, Karen spat. Bradley, start the equipment. Two patrol members moved toward the excavators, but their hearts weren't in it. Word had spread about yesterday, the workers walking away, Brad's arrest, the FBI's interest. These weren't hardened criminals, just folks who'd been swept up in a scheme that had gotten way out of hand. Gentlemen, I called loud enough for all to hear. Before you touch those machines, know that there are federal agents watching. Interstate fraud, racketeering, conspiracy to deprive civil rights. You want to add to that list? The two men froze. Miller, the young patrol member who'd looked uneasy before, actually stepped back. Mrs. White, maybe we should... Do your job! Karen screamed. All of you. That's what I pay you for. A new voice cut through the tension. Actually, that's what we need to talk about. Marcus stepped out from behind my barn, not in uniform, but that badge on his belt caught the morning sun. Just visiting my old friend Tom, he said, easy as ever, mounting my porch. Happened to mention I was in the area. Some colleagues thought they'd stop by too. That's when state police emerged, hands resting casually but meaningfully on their weapons. And behind them, two more figures in plain suits, the kind that only mean one thing, FBI. Mrs. White, one of the suits, called out Agent Sarah Clark. That's an interesting claim about authority. Care to explain what authority your patrol has to operate heavy equipment on private property? Karen's face cycled through anger, fear, calculation. We have documents, safety violations, community standards. Fascinating, Agent Clark replied. We'd love to see those along with all HOA financial records, meeting minutes, and correspondence about property acquisitions. I need to call my lawyer, Karen muttered. Robert Turner, I offered. He's a bit tied up. Something about turning state's evidence. Karen's color faded. Behind her, the patrol began backing away, some already slipping to their cars. The construction workers vanished, just left the equipment like a child's toy chest spilled on the lawn. You can't do this, Karen whispered. Do you know who you're dealing with? The connections. I have the money, $40 million worth, Marcus said. Your son was pretty specific, made our jobs easier. Financial crimes are a lot clearer when you know the exact amounts. Everyone inside, I said, gesturing at my door. Coffee's getting cold, and I think Mrs. White has some explaining to do. It was surreal watching them file into my kitchen. Karen White, who'd tried to bulldoze my life, sitting at the table where my grandmother used to roll pie crusts. The FBI setting up recorders, Marcus leaning against the counter like we were just two old friends. Here's what I don't get, I said, settling into my chair. You could have developed anywhere. Why the harassment? Why not just make fair offers? Karen's laugh was bitter. Fair. Do you know what land costs when people want to sell, when they have options? The only way to make the numbers work was to make selling the only option. So you created problems, Agent Clark said, her recorder running, and then offered solutions. It's business, Karen said. Supply and demand. I created demand by limiting the supply of peace and quiet. That's an interesting way to confess to extortion, the other agent murmured. Karen's voice shook. I want immunity. I'll tell you everything, the shell companies, the other developments, the investors, but I want a deal. That's not how this works, Clark said. You don't get to terrorize communities and then bargain your way out. But please keep talking. Everything you say helps the case. Finally, her composure cracked. It was perfect. The patrol gave us legitimacy. The fines gave us pressure. The violations gave us legal cover. If people just cooperated, if they rolled over, I corrected. Gave up their homes, their rights. Rights, Karen snarled. The right to stand in the way of progress, to keep millions locked up in chicken farms and vegetable patches. The right to say no, Marcus said quietly. The right to keep what's theirs. The right to live without harassment. A knock at my door. Deputy Williams stuck his head in, apologetic. Sheriff Media's blocking the road, 15 patrol members trying to leave. Apparently someone leaked video of yesterday's confrontation. Through my window, Beth Anderson gave a little wave, phone still out. Mrs. White, Agent Clark said we'll need you to come with us. Not under arrest yet, but we have extensive questions about your interstate operations. I'm not saying another word without my lawyer, Karen spat. That's your right, Clark agreed. Though you should know Mr. Turner has been very cooperative, especially about the Arizona properties. And the Nevada ones. Oh, and that fabricated environmental violation in New Mexico. Karen went very still. 20 years versus 2 is a powerful motivator, Clark said. Your choice. They let her out, all fight gone. The woman who'd commanded an empire of fear reduced to a suspect in the back of a black SUV. The patrol scattered, abandoning uniforms, trying to blend back into being ordinary folks. Some would face charges, others would testify, all would remember the day their pretend authority met real consequences. As the last vehicle left, Marcus and I sat on my porch. Morning had turned warm birds singing like nothing had happened. "You knew," I said when I called about the fence. "You already knew what they were doing." He nodded. Suspected. Needed someone inside to push them into showing their hand. Someone stubborn enough to take the heat. You used me as bait. I gave you the chance to fight back. Big difference. In Tom, they'd driven out 12 families, good people who didn't deserve it. You were the first one too stubborn to buckle. Or too stupid, I said. And we both laughed. Sometimes those are the same thing. He stood stretched. This isn't over. There'll be trials, testimony, angry investors. But you'll be here. Damn right, I said. Let them come. Your dad would be proud, Tom. After he left, I walked through my house, seeing it with new eyes. Every room held memories, my parents, my wife, my whole life centered on this land. Karen White had seen only dollars, only profit. She never understood what she was really trying to take. My phone rang again. "Mr. Granger, this is Rebecca Morrison from Channel 9. Would you give us an interview about what happened?" "No thanks," I said. "This story's not about me." "Then what's it about?" "It's about boundaries. The ones we draw, the ones we defend. About real community, not the kind you buy into with HOA fees. And it's about remembering that just because someone has power doesn't mean they have the right to use it." "That sounds like an interview to me," she said. "Then you've got all you need," I replied and hung up. The day stretched out: chickens to feed, vegetables to water, fences to walk. The simple routines Karen White had tried to destroy, thinking they were worthless. But worth isn't measured in development potential. It's measured in mornings like this, when a man can walk his land without fear, without someone else's vision being forced on him. I poured myself another cup of coffee, sat on my porch, and watched the sun climb higher, warming the fields. Somewhere Karen White was explaining herself to federal agents. Somewhere her investors were panicking over lost millions. Somewhere families who'd been driven out were learning they might see justice. But here on my 40 acres there was only peace, the kind you can't buy, can't steal, can't force. The kind that comes from standing your ground when it counts. The war was won. Now came the harder part, keeping the victory. But today I just sat on my porch, drank my coffee, and listened to the birds. The patrol was gone. The sheriff had done his job. And me, I still had chickens to feed. Sometimes the best victories are the ones that let you come home. By the time I finished my morning eggs, the story had already gone viral. Channel 9 had looped a cut from my security cameras alongside a deputy's body cam. HOA attempts to bulldoze family ranch, gets arrested instead. Within 24 hours, it had passed 2 million views. People were seeing it. People were believing it. Beth Anderson stopped by, grinning, not because she filmed it, but because the town finally saw the truth. "Look at this, Tom," she said. People from all over the country commenting, sharing their own HOA horror stories. I scrolled through a few. Stories from Florida: fines for the wrong color mailbox. California: foreclosures over missed dues. A widow in Ohio lost her home over unapproved flowers in her garden. Karen White wasn't unique. She was part of a system that had grown monstrous. "You've given people hope," Beth said. "Shown them these bullies can be beaten." I handed her a legal pad instead of a speech. She wrote down names, a witness circle forming a list that ran off the page. Hope looks better on paper when it comes with phone numbers and sworn statements. The phone kept ringing, reporters mostly, lawyers offering to represent me, activists asking me to be their spokesperson, even a Hollywood producer curious about movie rights. I let most of it slide. The chickens didn't care about 15 minutes of fame. Marcus stopped by that afternoon. He looked exhausted but satisfied, like a hunter after a long chase. "Karen's empire is crumbling faster than expected," he said, accepting the beer I offered. Once the FBI got involved, people started talking. How bad? 12 HOA operations across 5 states. About 3,000 families affected. Total theft roughly $120 million in Karen. She was just the tip of a very dirty iceberg. Not all properties were for resorts. Some were shopping centers, apartments, even a casino in Nevada. I whistled low. All for profit. Karen got greedier than most, Marcus said. What about her investors? James Harrison from Premier Resorts, he said, sharp smile, claims he knew nothing about the harassment, just a talented negotiator. Bull, I muttered. But proving it is harder. When your negotiator gets $40 million in land for $5 million in purchases, you have to be deliberately blind. Marcus took a long pull from his beer. The forensic accountants are having a field day. Karen was skimming from her own investors, too. Honor among thieves, I muttered. Brad singing like a canary, Marcus continued, trying to cut a deal by giving up everything. According to him, Karen had judges, county commissioners, even a state senator in her pocket. Funny how quickly politicians distance themselves when federal indictments start flying. Representative Walsh already claimed she was barely known to him despite $50,000 in campaign contributions. A car pulled up. Not a reporter this time, but old Frank Johnson. I hadn't seen him since he sold 6 months ago. He looked older, diminished somehow, but his handshake was firm. Tom, he said simply, thank you. I didn't do it for thanks, Frank. You stood up. That's more than I could do. 6 generations on that land. 6. And he let the weight of that settle between us. I sold out because I couldn't take the harassment. You were protecting your family, no shame in that. Marcus called later. We might get restitution. Fair market value plus damages. I laughed bitterly. Money can't buy back 6 generations of history. No, Marcus agreed. It can't. We sat in silence as the afternoon sun stretched shadows across the yard. Frank finally spoke again. I heard you had 47 violations they made up. We had 32. The Petermans had 51. She had a whole system, spreadsheets tracking which families to target, how to escalate, when to make the final offer. Sounds like evidence, I said. FBI has it all now, he said. Her home computer was a gold mine. Frank turned to leave, then came back. What you did, it matters. To all of us who couldn't fight back, it matters. After he left, I thought about what fighting back really meant. Not just keeping my land, but exposing a system that preyed on the vulnerable. Bureaucracy, weaponized neighbors turned against each other, all for profit. My phone rang again. Agent Clark. Mr. Granger, we've frozen all of Karen White's assets and those of MDC Holdings. We're investigating 15 similar operations nationwide, based on patterns we've identified. 15. Conservative estimate. A whole playbook for this kind of operation, online forums, templates for violation notices, even recommended lawyers. Organized crime with HOA bylaws instead of baseball bats. What about families who lost homes? We're working on restitution. Complicated. Some properties already developed. Can't unbuild a shopping center. But between asset forfeiture and civil suits, victims should see some justice. Some justice. Better than none, but still hollow. You can't restore a heritage with a check. You can't rebuild 6 generations of memories with court settlements. That evening, cars started arriving at my gate. Neighbors, friends, community. Beth brought a casserole. Jim Bradley brought beer. Wilson's, Martinez, Smith families, old and new, all converging on my land. Community, Beth said simply. The real kind. We figured you were fighting for all of us. At least we can show up for you. They brought food, drinks, folding chairs, even a grill. Within an hour, my front yard looked like a county fair. Kids chased chickens. Adults swapped stories. Someone called for speech. I shook my head. Finally, I stood on my porch looking out at faces that had become more than neighbors. They were allies. I didn't do anything special, I said. Just said no and meant it. The real heroes are people like Marcus who investigated when it would have been easier to look away. The FBI who took this seriously. And all of you who stood witness when it mattered. Don't forget Beth, someone shouted and everyone laughed. Karen White thought she was building a community with her HOA. Community isn't something you manufacture with bylaws and patrol cars. It's showing up, looking out for each other, respecting boundaries and defending them when they're threatened. What happens now, Jim Bradley asked. I imagine the legitimate homeowners will figure it out, I said. Without Karen's interference, maybe they can build something real. Something based on mutual respect instead of fear. Evening fell and I found myself thinking about cycles. How Karen's empire rose on fear and fell on courage. How the land she coveted remained indifferent. How communities can be broken by tyrants but rebuilt by neighbors. Marcus found me sitting apart from the crowd watching the sunset. Penny, for your thoughts, he asked. Just wondering how many other Karens are out there. How many families are facing this right now? Fewer after today, he said. The footage of her arrest, the FBI involvement, the media coverage, it's all a warning. Tomorrow brings more battles, he said quietly. The trials, civil suits. Investors won't give up. I know I said, but tonight I just want to enjoy this. My land, my community, my life. The party lasted past midnight. Stories shared plans made to support families through legal processes. Someone even started a fund for legal defense against HOA abuse. By the time the last car pulled away, we'd raised $12,000 in pledges. I stood alone on my porch. Coyotes called in the distance. An owl hunted. Wind rustled through grass. The land would outlast us all, our fights, our schemes, our victories, our defeats. My phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Granger, you don't know me, but I was one of the patrol members, the young one who looked away. I'm testifying tomorrow about everything I saw. Thank you for standing up. It gave some of us the courage to do the right thing. Daniel Miller. I saved the message. In the chaos, I'd forgotten that Karen's army wasn't monsters, just people caught in something bigger than they understood. People who, given a chance, might choose differently. The empire had fallen. Now came the harder work building something better in its place. But tonight had shown me something important. We weren't alone. We were a community real forged in conflict, sustained by choice. Tomorrow would bring challenges, trials, media, the slow work of justice. But tonight, my land was peaceful. My community was strong. Karen White's reign of terror was over. The courtroom was packed the day Karen White was sentenced. 6 months of legal proceedings had led to this moment, and half of Texas seemed to want a front row seat. I sat in the second row between Marcus and Beth Anderson, watching the woman who'd terrorized our community face the consequences. Karen looked smaller somehow. Her power suit replaced with a plain gray outfit, perfect hair flattened and lifeless. The arrogance that had defined her gone, replaced by fear. Will the defendant please rise? Judge David Foster commanded. Older man, silver-haired, stern presence that filled the room. Karen stood lawyer beside her. Brad was already serving his 8-year sentence, having pled guilty early, hoping for leniency that didn't come. Karen White, you have been found guilty on 23 federal counts, including racketeering, conspiracy to commit fraud, extortion, and deprivation of civil rights. Over 3,000 families affected. Lifetime savings stolen. Communities destroyed. You perverted a system meant to help neighbors maintain their communities into a weapon of greed. This court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison, followed by 10 years of supervised release. You are also ordered to pay full restitution to all victims, currently calculated at $47 million. All assets obtained through your criminal enterprise are forfeited. Furthermore, you are permanently barred from serving on any homeowners association board or engaging in real estate transactions beyond a personal residence. The gavel came down with a sound like finality. Court was adjourned. Karen was led away in handcuffs. For a brief moment as she passed our row, I caught something almost human in her eyes. Regret, defeat. Maybe both, then gone. Outside, reporters swarmed. I pushed through, ignoring questions, until one young woman stepped in front of me. Mr. Granger, what's your reaction? I stopped, considered. Justice was served. That's all that matters. 25 years seems harsh for financial crimes, she pressed. Tell that to Frank Johnson, who lost 6 generations of family land. Tell that to Janet Morrison, whose husband died from the stress. Tell that to the 3,000 families who thought they were buying into communities and found themselves in nightmares. 25 years is getting off easy. The aftermath brought changes I hadn't expected. The Texas legislature, embarrassed by national attention, passed what they called the Thomas Law, though I'd begged them not to name it after me. HOAs were now limited in enforcement powers. Fines couldn't exceed $50 without court approval. No HOA could maintain patrol or security forces beyond standard contracted services. Board members face personal liability for harassment or discriminatory practices. Not perfect, but a start. Marcus got promoted to chief of police, though he still swung by most mornings to trade updates while we walked the fence line. "Never thought I'd be sitting in the big office," he said 3 weeks after the trial. "You earned it," I said. "Not many would have taken on someone like Karen. Not many would have stood up like you did." "The best part," Marcus said, smile sharp, "the copycats are folding. 12 similar operations shut down across the country. Fear's a powerful motivator." "I agree," I said. "So's courage. You showed people they could fight back. That's worth more than any law." Agent Clark called regularly, updating me. Premier Resorts agreed to a settlement, James Harrison personally paying $10 million in damages. He admitted knowing not in so many words, but faced with evidence of 47 emails discussing pressure tactics and motivated sellers, a settlement was prudent. "What about the land?" I asked. "Interesting part," Marcus said. "They're creating a land trust. Properties MDC Holdings acquired through fraud will be offered back to original owners at original sale price, or, if developed, full current market value. Frank Johnson's getting his farm back." I had to sit down. He's getting it back. Some families moved on, built new lives, but they'll have a choice. A choice instead of having it taken. That's part of justice. I walked to the barn, ran my hands over my father's workbench, the same one Brad threatened. Just wood and metal, but it represented something larger. The right to choose your own life, to maintain your own space, to say no when the powerful demand yes. A car pulled up. Not unusual these days, but I smiled. Frank Johnson and his wife, Sarah, daughter Emily, back on their land. "Tom, we wanted you to be the first to know we're moving back. Rebuilding the farmhouse, starting over." "That's wonderful," I said. "Because of you." "You know that, right?" Frank said. "If you hadn't stood up, I had advantages," I said. "You didn't. No family to threaten, pure stubbornness. Don't sell yourself short." 5 years old, Chase, my grandson, wandered over to the chicken coop, laughing, scattering feed. Same chickens or their descendants that had started it all. Teaching the next generation what matters. Meadowbrook held its first real community meeting, a proper one. No uniforms, no parliamentary procedure. Beth Anderson elected temporary coordinator. People discussed helping each other, respecting boundaries, resolving disputes face to face. No fines without full community vote. No enforcement without due process. Less a charter, more a peace treaty. I stood slowly. Communities aren't built on rules, they're built on respect. You can't legislate neighborliness. All you can do is show up for each other. Hope it spreads. If someone genuinely causes problems, talk to them. And if that doesn't work, laws already exist for actual crimes. You don't need a private government. Driving home, I thought about 6 months of change. Karen's empire gone, but more importantly, fear faded. People learning to be neighbors again, choosing community over control. Evening rounds, checking fences, feeding chickens, watering the garden. Simple tasks Karen saw as beneath notice, yet these were the backbone of life. In trying to take them from me, she only made me value them more. Phone buzzed. Daniel Miller again testifying, starting fresh, inspired by courage. Redemption possible even for those who'd worn the uniform of oppression. Darkness fell. I sat on the porch, looking at land 3 generations had worked. Threat gone, vigilance remained. Always will be. There are those who seek power over others, use rules as weapons, see freedom as something to control. But there are those who stand up, draw lines in the dirt, defend them. Today, more of the latter than yesterday. Tomorrow, even more. The stars came out bright, eternal over Texas. Somewhere, Karen White learning to live in federal boundaries, families returning to homes they thought lost, communities healing, and here on 40 acres, life continued. Honest work, simple work, the kind no HOA could improve, no patrol enhance. Tomorrow, new challenges. Tonight, the only rule that mattered, treat others as you'd want to be treated. Everything else just paperwork. 1 year later, I stood where Karen had threatened my life, watching Chase help fix the fence she cut. 5 years old, learning some things are worth protecting. The ranch had become a kind of working monument, people visiting to see where greed met resistance. Frank Johnson rebuilding. Emily studying agricultural law, documenting HOA abuse. Beth organizing movie nights and community gardens. Life moving forward. Moving. I carried Chase inside, sleeping in my arms, clutching the toy fence piece he'd been playing with. Land legacy lessons protected and passed on. Courage ripples outward choices. Matter boundaries endure. Karen White's empire fell, but the real victory. Showing that one stubborn person standing for what's right can echo far beyond a single fence line.